These days it's becoming common to hear people express their joy when a miracle happens in their life. That the God of XYZ has done this for me, the God of ABC has done it for me. Now, before you crucify them, let's go into the Bible and look at what the Bible has to say about these things. All right. Now, you see, in Genesis chapter 12, we were not told how God met Abraham. We were only told that God has spoken to Abraham. Now, in chapter 17, we were now made to understand the kind of relationship that existed between Abraham and God. God had to tell Abraham that, hey, look, I am the Almighty, which means that up to that time, Abraham assumed God to be one of the several gods in the land. Now, that takes me to the very, very beginning, because in that time of Abraham, and even up till now, in some cases, you find that almost every house, every clan has its own god. There are several gods that were being worshipped. Some were worshipping stones, some were worshipping the moon god, some were worshipping the sun god, some were worshipping the god of fertility, the god of harvest, the river god, some were worshipping animals. All kinds of things were being worshipped as God. And every clan, every family has its own special deity that they serve. Now, so when Abraham heard in Genesis chapter 12, to him, whatever voice he heard, or whatever way he met God, this is one of the several gods in the land. So there was no big difference to Abraham. Look at all the story before Genesis chapter 17. Abraham behaved like the average person in his time until Genesis chapter 17. God had to tell him that, hey, I am a different God. This is my own way of things. So you find that set a precedence, because each time God had to approach any man or woman is about to call or is about to use, he introduced himself, at least at those early stage. So Abraham had to transfer that knowledge and that birthright of relationship with God to his first son, Isaac. Isaac did the same thing to Jacob, who he adopted as his first son by virtue of birthright. Okay, now so this became a pattern. Why? Because there were myriads of God, many gods that were being worshipped in that time. So each time God comes, God had to introduce himself. That was why God had to enter a covenant with Israel, because the Hebrews were the only religion, the only people that have a monotheist God, a one God, that they don't have every other gods. They don't have small gods that they use to approach a bigger God, like it's common in most culture and most religion. There's always one smaller god and all those things, and their one main God and all those things. But the Hebrews were the only set of people that their God is just one God. So each time they want to differentiate that God from every other God in whatever land they find themselves, they say the God of the Hebrews or the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You find the same experience when God called Moses in Genesis chapter 3. You need to understand that Moses grew up in Egypt, and in Egypt there were several gods. There were the god of fertility, the god of harvest, the moon god, the sun god, the god of the river Nile. There were several gods, you understand, in Egypt. So Moses was trained to understand all these gods, to know about all these gods. And don't forget that Moses knew he was an Hebrew. Okay, he knew he was an Hebrew, but he never had that knowledge of the God of the Hebrew. All he knew is that he had the heritage in Hebrew, but his training and his understanding was the many gods in Israel, in Egypt. So when we got to Genesis chapter 3, and God had to call Moses, God had to introduce himself that I'm not one of the gods of Egypt that you're used to, but I'm the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God had to tell him his personal name, because you know that he was an educated man. God had to tell him, I am that I am. Because when God told him, this is who I am, so what will I tell them in Egypt? Why? Because in Egypt there were several gods. So how will I get to Egypt and tell them that you are the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? To them, you are just one of the other many gods in the land. But God had to tell him, I am that I am, to separate himself from the several other gods that were being worshipped. All right, you see, this is not a tradition or practice, rather, that was limited to the Abrahamic time. Even up to the time of the Greeks, the Romans were even worse. They have several gods, and almost every religion in the world has the same thing. When we now got to Elijah, that was the same problem. As of the time Elijah came to the scene, the Israelites had gone into apostasy. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Moabites, and so many countries that they've come across to, they've had interaction with, had corrupted their understanding of God. We should not forget at this stage that As the time of Elijah, it was more of oral tradition. Story, this is our God, the God that took us from Egypt, the God. These were more of oral tradition. The average Israelite, as of the time of Elijah, had no practical experience or practical interaction with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The temple had been destroyed. The priesthood had become scattered. The lineage, spiritual lineage, the practice of the high priest, it has been scattered. It was not being strictly adhered to. We now have people who are Israelites, but who are followers and worshippers of Baal and other gods around them. No, they mix with the Sidonians, the Philistines, the Moabites, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Greeks, the Persians, and the likes. So they've interacted with these nations and they've adopted their gods. Yet there are still some remnants that kept the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So now, when Elijah wanted to bring back the God that is the God of the Hebrews, he had to tell them that your God that your forefathers taught you about is the God that answers by fire. The response of the people when fire came down tells us, showcased to us the depth of their departure from the knowledge of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. When they shouted, the God of Elijah is the God indeed, the God that answered by fire is the God indeed. Do you understand that? So it has become a practice that when people who are not so used, so close to the God, the Almighty, experience things that are beyond their understanding through either a man of God, they always refer to that God in association with the man of God. You understand? So it's a tradition that has been set in the Bible. So when you hear people say, oh, the God of this person, the God of this person, it's not necessarily idol worshiping. Yes, I know in some cases some people turn into idol worship, some people turn into hero worship. But the truth is that the world is confused. There's so many religions in the world. There are so many people claiming this, claiming that. And the Bible understands that. So how do you know this is the God of the Bible? The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Or in some cases they say the God of the Hebrews or the God of the Israelites. Of course, Israel comes from Jacob anyway. Do you understand that? So before you quickly condemn anybody that is hero worshipping or is either worshipping a man of God, first understand that they have not necessarily done anything wrong. They may be taking it too far, but this is basically scriptures. All right. See you another time. Enjoy your day.